guys may or may not have known this, but we are working on a video game based upon the music that I create. Not really, but so it's a game from the soundtrack, doing it backwards there. It's called Zweihänder, and it's set in a sort of medieval-esque world, and it's got some pretty big plot twists. Anyway, we've been working on this very slowly with some awesome volunteer help from the community. And also, we've got our head developer here. This is Will. What's up, Will?
Hey.
So, Will's been working on this in, like only a few hours a week. And we're trying to get this to a point where we can put it on Kickstarter. So we wanted to show you guys what we have, pull you guys on the inside, and say, check this out. So I'll tell you the style real quick. It's a Metroidvania-style game where you can run around and take quests. It's 2D, but it's using the Unreal Engine. So you're going to have, 2D in a 3D world. And the most interesting gameplay mechanic that we have developed is a mechanic where you can go to a crossroads and then press a button to turn north, south, east, or west. It's sort of like, you basically shift your 2D world, and now you're headed north. Now, some people say, like, oh, that's kind of like Fez, where you can rotate the camera and it's 3D. It's not like Fez in the sense that you can only do this at certain key points like crossroads and secret spots. Maybe there's a secret hidden, path in the woods that you can take. This will give you some really interesting quest options. For instance, you take a quest at a bar and the guy says, hey, please go to the top of the mountain and retrieve this artifact. Well, you can either go up the front of the mountain or you can take a turn, go through a cave, and then climb the mountain internally. So there's, there'll be different enemy encounters, there'll be different items depending on which way you go. So that's the game that we're working on. So, Will, how are we doing so far with some of these systems? What do we have in place?
So we have quite a number of systems in place. First of all, what we started with is called the RPG Starter Kit, and it provided us a very simple framework for the basic elements of an action-adventure game. We have a quest system, we have an inventory system, and we have just the basic combat system that allows you to just do some melee attacks. And we've since built upon those systems quite a bit, and we've upgraded to an entirely new plugin that's called the Action RPG Inventory System, which has given us more functionality, and it's also multiplayer friendly for some stretch goals that we have in mind. And we've also built a lot on the camera system. It's a very intelligent camera system because building a 3D world, but constraining that to a platformer genre creates some interesting challenges because naturally occurring terrain doesn't follow linear pathways. So we had to create a really dynamic camera system that allowed us to have different modes. When the player moves along, the camera will do any number of things. It might follow in a perpendicular sense to the player, or it might rotate with the player as he's traveling up a cylindrical structure, or it might just maintain an equidistant location from the player so that the player can kind of very gradually and subtly curve along a horizon line so that the view space that the user sees is just like that pretty crest line with beautiful background, mountains and things.
Yeah, so while we're keeping him locked to a 2D spline, we're doing some really interesting things that I don't think have been done before in a side-scrolling game, not that I've seen. So I'm really proud of some of the work that everyone's been doing on that. I think it's going to make it a very interesting, game once it hits on Kickstarter. I think people are going to be like, whoa, have you seen this? It's going to be pretty cool. All right, as far as the graphics go, we have a few people out there submitting assets, and we have some people working on some of the main characters. Now, the main character in this is sort of a battle librarian. We have two guys. They're both kind of battle librarians. One's more of a mercenary. And I'm not going to get into the plot right now, but both of those characters are nearing completion. We just need to do a little animation and get their combat down. But I'm really, really happy with the work that the community's done on this. So thanks, guys. It's freaking amazing. So we do have sort of the main characters, a couple of the main characters outlined, and we do have them rendered. So some of the community members put that together. They're kind of both battle librarian, mercenary types. Battle librarian, you guys can ask us about it later. I'm not going to give away the plot right now, but Will, tell us about what we have here.
We're using physically based rendering. We're using DirectX 12 tessellation via using height maps.
Now, you mentioned DirectX 12. We've also committed to make sure this game works on Vulkan and Linux. So we should see this game on Linux and Windows and maybe other platforms if the platforms are interested. I'm not going to lock it down to anything. I will say that a lot of my ideas have to do with mouse and keyboard, but this is a side-scroller. It could probably work on a controller as well, even if you're on PC. So I'm not going to limit the platform options. We'll just see what happens.
Absolutely. We've definitely we've compiled the engine from source code and successfully published test builds of the project and run them on those platforms.
So those are both Debian-based platforms, which is usually the platform for gaming. Now, when it comes to the writing, that's something that I'm kind of working on myself. I'm using Artisy Draft, which is the same program that they use to create games like The Witcher. It allows you to go back and create all your characters, and then it allows you to create all your dialogue trees, and then you can also add things to your dialogue trees like, hey, is your character wounded, yes or no? Then the dialogue will shift and go into a different direction. Even it can even be something as simple as like one of the dialogue situations I wrote in the beginning of the game was like, is your character holding a glass of tea, yes or no? And then that would take the dialogue in a different direction. Now, this didn't work perfectly with the Unreal Engine, but Will, what happened?
Okay, so what we needed to do was just come up with a very intuitive system that linked all the different aspects of like a living world into one very like interconnected system. So we have a day-night cycle where we have like the sun coming up over the horizon. We have a lot of different changes that are happening to reflect a very realistic depiction of the sunrise and sunset at midday. It changes the zenith color of the horizon, fog color, fog density, fog elevation. Those things happen like where if it's in the dead of night, you start to see kind of this spooky atmospheric effect happening. And then we also have season changes from basically we use the material instance constants, which are just the parameters that control the way our textures are rendered, and we can apply things like just like a subtle tint to those to change from spring to fall colors. And we have all these different particle systems to simulate falling leaves as well as snow particles, rain, and just a lot of different techniques that we've integrated into the game system so that we can call on these events and really create a very interesting and unique situation for every different quest that we're doing. So you might do a quest in one area and then come back to the same area and be doing different quests, and it's going to look totally different. You're going to be in winter instead of summer. It's going to be night instead of day. It's going to be different weather.
So we're building a decently large map. It's about 15, 16 kilometers square, but what we're doing is we're reusing a lot of the map and we're instancing. And what that means is we're using the same map, but we're giving you different quests, different monsters, depending on what you do in the game. So say you talk to a guy and he says, meet me tomorrow night, which is another thing that, working in this day-night cycle and also working in like seasons, you can be like, there can be certain things that only happen at one day of the year or whatever. But anyway, like he says, meet me tomorrow night. So you go meet him tomorrow night, and there's all different, there's a different scenario that's instancing on the same map. So it'll be very dynamic, and when you travel back and forth, depending on what quest you have active, there will be different things going on. So that should be a pretty interesting way to play the game. But the game is going to be linear in a sense. Like it sounds like it may be open world, and being a first game, I didn't want to go too ambitious and make it totally open world. What we're doing is we're creating miniaturized sandbox, sort of like they did with Deus Ex. They create a miniature sandbox where it's here you are, and there's like several things you can do here, but there's one entry and one exit point. You come in this way and you do a few things, and that is your exit point. There are several other things you can do while you're at this stage of the game, but one entry point and one exit point so we can control the narrative. And there's going to be some pretty messed up plot twists that I think you guys are going to love, but I cannot give those away.
Absolutely. And to comment a little bit on the open world that we were talking about, in a sense it is those sandboxes, but the world as we've built it, we started with a piece of software called World Machine, and it allowed us to use a lot of very realistic, naturally occurring like algorithms that depict rainfall and hydraulic erosion, thermal erosion over the course of hundreds of years, and to really accurately represent the different biospheres that we have, like whether it's a jungle, a forest, a snow-capped mountain, or some sand dunes or some sandy beaches. And so we brought all that massive world from World Machine into Unreal Engine using world composition. So it's actually gridded out into this gigantic square that's cut up into different tiles. So the tiles load very intelligently based on the position of the camera and the needs of the particular environment that you're in. So you'll never have to stop and wait for a loading screen. You'll get some cutscenes, but it'll all be seamless. You'll be walking from one end of the world to another virtually and without any sort of like pause for any loading or anything like that. So
I think this game is going to be a hell of a lot of fun. It's probably going to take a couple of years to develop once we hit our goals on Kickstarter. But right now, what you're really looking at is going to be a dark and gritty game with some interesting and very quirky characters set in a somewhat realistic world with some supernatural stuff thrown in for good measure. You got to have some weirdness. And I think it'll just be a ton of fun to play. So it's a game that I've wanted to play for a long time. I love the Metroidvania style, but I wanted to sort of mix that with maybe like an Elder Scrolls style quest system or maybe an RPG style quest system, and keep it somewhat limited. And as we get more and more funding on Kickstarter, we can bring more people on to help write quests and more developers on to make those happen. So the game can get bigger, but we're going to start with realistic goals so that we can make sure that it happens, and then just get it done. So, Will, thanks very much. We're going to give you guys more frequent updates now. Maybe once or twice a month we'll pop in and be like, hey, combat's looking good. Let's check that out, and just show you very specific points of the game. And since we're all working on this, we'll probably have a lot of behind-the-scenes footage that we can throw up once we get going on Kickstarter. Just can't give away too much of the plot. Anything you want to say in closing, Will?
Just that we have a really amazing team. We put out this forum post a number of months ago, and just so many people have stepped up from the community and volunteered countless hours toward this project. And we have some incredible veteran talent of the industry. We have animators, programmers, 3D artists, shader artists, just a lot of people that from all over the world, really, from the UK, from Germany, and a lot of different places in the United States. So we couldn't have gone this far without an incredible community that is just so selfless and volunteering so much of their time for this project. So I just want to give them credit.
That's really what I wanted this to be, like a big community effort. But we have to have a good idea at the heart of it. And we were slowed down a little bit by the split up of the channel, but it's about time to get back down to serious business on this. So anyway, let us know what you guys thought in the comments. Let us know if you guys have any ideas. We will listen to ideas. We've got our ideas, but if you have an amazing idea, I don't see any reason why we can't maybe add that in. So let us know. Go ahead and click on the stuff over there on the side of the screen. There's awesome stuff, new t-shirts, maybe even a Zweihänder t-shirt. I'm not wearing mine today, but there's some pretty cool Zweihänder t-shirts. And we'll see you guys in the forum.